Hello all. Today we're going to take some time to really learn about the idea of layering in colored pencil. Layering is one of those really important processes that kind of makes the difference between an amateur working with colored pencils and someone who has a little bit more understanding to create depth. Ultimately, our goal here is to create a sense of perspective and value and color based on the lighting. Now, the perspective business we've covered already. That's something that you all by now know how to do and should feel pretty comfortable with. We've set up a basic horizon line. You probably can see it very lightly here. You notice that I have a vanishing point here, and you might be able to spot one that I have way off on the opposite side of the paper as well. So I based it to make two boxes in 2-point perspective. One box far below the horizon line and one that sits basically on top of the horizon line. As I said, all of that is nothing new. We've kind of covered that in class a couple times. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the idea of layering with colored pencils to get that richness, to get something that really looks like it might in reality. So when I'm selecting colored pencils, I'm actually not just choosing one color, I'm actually choosing a multitude of colors. So I decided for today's example, I'm going to choose and make a green box. So I selected a green colored pencil. That was my first choice. I went into the box and looked and said, okay, I kind of like that green, we'll go with a green colored pencil. When I select those colored pencils, I'm not only creating or choosing that color, that green that I've already got here, I'm actually choosing a range. I'm going to choose a set of analogous colors, which again, you should all feel really comfortable with because that is a term we've talked about. So I'm choosing a range. So I selected the local green, or the green that I really wanted. I chose sort of a chartreuse green, a color that is, slightly lighter than the one I've got here. I also went up the color range and decided I would choose something that's a bit darker. And then I selected one that's even darker. It's actually called dark green. And I also then went down the range and chose something in yellow that's sort of got a lot of the same that's in the chartreuse. So I have the yellow and this sort of yellow-green color. And then of course I chose white because I'm going to need that in places to create a really strong highlight. And to take it one notch further, to kind of give it as dark as I possibly could, I chose this blue, this sort of royal blue color that will make the darkest green I have even darker. Now, in addition to those, I also wanted something that'll make something even darker than that. You think, well, how could I possibly go darker than that dark green and that royal blue? Well, in fact, if I choose a brown, a neutral, I'm going to get myself something that creates kind of a muddy color, a color that's going to seem really far off in the distance and not nearly as bright as some of the other greens that I've chosen. So I've selected this range here that you can see that I'm going to work with. Now you might ask yourself, why didn't you choose a black colored pencil? Well, black's a great colored pencil, don't get me wrong, but it is for sure what I call the colored pencil of last resort. It has a tendency to make all of these other colors seem really dead and flat. As I said, it certainly has its purpose, but for today, this guy has no purpose. We're not going to be using him. We're only going to be using this range of color. And we'll get something that's close to black. We'll be able to achieve that with the darkest green, the royal blue, and the brown. And quite frankly, that's going to look more like reality anyway. So if you'll see what I have here on the paper, what I've already done is I've already colored this box. And you'll notice that this particular box does not have an opening to it. It's just a solid cube that has 3 sides to it based on the horizon lines that the horizon line and the vanishing point we've already talked about. So I have a light top, because if you'll notice that this little light icon at the top is sort of shining down, representing where the light is, so it's the lightest side. I've got a medium side and I've got a dark side. In all 3 of these, I haven't just used the basic green. I've used the medium chartreuse, I've used the yellow, I've used all of this range of color to achieve what I've got here. So I'm about to do this last interior space here, and I'm going to use the process of layering. So I want you to see that so you have a better understanding of what I need you to do. So I'm going to take this basic green color, that sort of beginning local color that I chose. And the reason why we call it a local color, it's the color that we sort of most associate with this subject. So for example, if I were to ask you to go to the grocery store and I ask you to look at a pile of apples sitting in the grocery store, you're probably, if I were to ask you what color they are, most people are going to immediately say that they're red apples if they're a pile of red apples. That's sort of its local color, that color in our head we've sort of assigned it to be. But in fact, if you take your artist's eye and you actually study the color that's on that apple, you're probably going to see other colors. Yes, in fact, you're probably going to see areas of yellow-green. You're probably going to see little spots of green. You might even see little dots of brown on the apple. And in fact, you might even see different shades of red. You might see really bright, vibrant red. You might see areas that are more like sort of a rusty red or burnt red. There's going to be a variety of color. So yes, while we sort of locally assign it to be red, with our artist's eye, if we truly studied it, it actually would be a variety of non-local colors, colors other than the color we assign it to. So if you look, what I'm doing here is I'm really lightly, with hardly any pressure, I'm laying down my first layer of color, and I'm laying down that local green color, that color that I've sort of assigned I want the box to be. But I'm not pressing really hard because I don't want to burnish. Here's a really important moment. You want to really remember this. This is key. Burnishing is when if I were to press really hard, think of pressing really hard with a colored pencil, and it's going to be great and it has a purpose, and we'll talk about it in a little bit. But if I were to do that on one of my first 3 or 4 layers of colored pencil, it's going to make this waxy surface that isn't going to allow me to put in other colored pencils to add so that they can mix. Because essentially what you have here is a stick, a paint in a stick form. So I'm laying down a layer of color, and then I want to mix other colors as well. So I might go into my darker green, and you'll notice I'm not pressing really hard again. I'm just putting in a very simple light layer, and I'm allowing them to mix. And I'm using that technique that we've already learned in class. I'm using a technique of hatching or cross-hatching. I myself enjoy some cross-hatching. That's what I feel most comfortable with. That's the style I like. So that's what I'm using here today. This is the inside of my box. So this box is going to be fairly dark on the interior, and I want it to be noticeably different than the other sides that I've already laid down. Because if you'll notice, I've got a very, very dark back of the box. I've got moderately dark top and bottom of the box. And now I'm working on the side, and I want it also to be different than all the other 3 sides that it comes in contact with. Because of course, depending on lighting, depends on what value or color that is. So I've now laid in, I think this is my 3rd layer of color on this box. I'm going to go even a notch darker by taking now the darkest green that I own here. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to cross hatch over top of that. And again, I'm going a different direction because each time I go a different direction, I'm sort of weaving them together so that they combine to make a new color. So if I have gone a bunch of times in one direction, I try to vary the directions a little bit. And again, I'm not pressing really hard at all because I want them to not burnish. I don't want to get that locked in waxy layer yet. I want that when I'm done. And the benefit of that when I'm done is everything will seem cohesive. It'll all seem like it's one. It seems like it belongs with one another. If I were to do it now, it's actually going to be like a force field preventing me from adding any other color that I wanted. So I'm getting closer, definitely getting closer. But I can tell you after doing all this that it's still not going to be dark enough to appear to look like the inside of the box. So again, I'm adding another layer of color, and I am now pressing a little bit harder. Not too hard, because again, I don't want to burnish, but I am pressing a little bit more, putting a little more pressure on this colored pencil. And you'll notice I don't have to be as specific anymore. I don't have to be as careful to color in the lines quite as neatly because I've got all these other layers of colors going on. I'm going to now go into a little bit of brown because I now know I want this really to be in shadow. So you'll notice that when I use the brown, it significantly dulls the green down. And it makes the green seem more like it's in shadow. So after applying the green, or the brown, excuse me, I'm going to go in and apply a little bit of blue, that royal blue that we looked at earlier. That's going to give me the opportunity to make this even darker. I'm going to cross hatch one more time, going a new direction. You can see that it's definitely getting closer to what I want. But I don't want to go as dark as I've done the back, because that's the place where the light no longer reaches. It's really far back in there. And to kind of give it a more finished look, this time when I hatch or cross hatch, I'm going to try to only go up and down. So it definitely looks like the up and down side of the box. I don't always have to crisscross diagonally. I could certainly cross vertically and horizontally. Get to the top of this box. I'm definitely getting closer to something that looks a little bit more three-dimensional. So I'm going to go back because I am getting really close. I'm going to go back in with my original, that very first green that I used, to get one more clean finished layer of green. Now I always say in class, and I joke about this with my students in school, and I also joke about this with my adult students who start out for the first time working with colored pencil or really anything. It's not like coloring a placemat at your local diner, because of course when you were a kid that was great and that is a lot of fun, and there's certainly a time and a place for that, because we've all had colored pencils in our hands at one point in our life, and we sort of think about those moments when we had them at those diners with placemats when we were a little kid. We either got crayons or colored pencils. That's great, but that isn't going to show artistry or skill. We're trying to mimic real life as much as possible. We're trying to get it to look as much like the reality of a box with lighting. So we've gone to the trouble of making 2-point perspective. Now we want to make sure that we do the same thing with the color and the value. We want it to look as much as possible like real life. So I'm not just scribbling. I'm going to take the time to use my craftsmanship and make sure that I've paid extra special attention to edges, clean them up as much as possible. Now I realize maybe I should go back to the back part of the box and go even darker, which I can do. And now I am getting really close to burnishing. I'm getting probably as close as I can to burnishing where it will no longer accept any more new colored pencil. And now make sure that back of the box is as dark as it can get without using our friend the black colored pencil. So I'm now using a little bit of the blue. And there I have what will look pretty much like the box that I'm hoping to achieve to make it look three-dimensional. Now, last step. You'll notice this little stick. I have a couple of these in the classroom. I also have colored pencils that do the same thing. They're called colorless blenders. And what they are is the same material that's inside the colored pencil minus color. And I actually, as I said, I have pencil versions of these as well. While they look like they're sort of a gray or tan color, they actually have no color in them at all. And their advantage is I can take those now and I can burnish. I can add those to what I've already done, and what they will do is they will lock in all the color, and they will make it look as if all those colors were intended to be blended together to begin with. So some of the scratchiness that might appear when you first apply those first couple layers will sort of disappear. And I can do that to any area I want. So now I'm going to do it to my darkest area, and I am pressing pretty hard. I'm pressing it probably as difficult as I can, or as hard as I can, without breaking the stick, because I need the stick to get through the rest of this. So I'm going to be very careful not to press so hard that I break it, but hard enough that now I'm getting this waxy surface on my box. And you'll notice it doesn't change any of the colors anywhere. All it does is blend them together sort of nice and neatly. So what I now have is a box in 2-point perspective with a medium side close to the light, a significantly dark interior all the way in the back of the box, 2 sides, both top and bottom, that are significantly dark but not as dark as the back, and this side panel that's also dark but again not as dark as that interior, because of course the light isn't bending around and reaching inside it there. And I also have a little guy down here that sort of mimics what it might look like without that. I've also put in a cast shadow. We're not going to talk too much about cast shadows today because that's a whole different video and a lot more information. But if you feel that you understand how to do that, and there's an example of one, I certainly would love you to take that risk. I'm still using some of the same greens, but this time I'm actually using a lot more of my friend here, the royal blue and the brown. But I do have still some of my same local color, that first green that I used in there. And I'm also only coloring horizontal hatching strokes, because I want that shadow to feel as flat as possible. Just a little secret that's on a separate subject, people have a tendency to want to color the shadow up and down or at a horizontal, and it'll make the shadow look like it's rising up and attacking the object. When you color a cast shadow, you only want it to be back and forth horizontal strokes, so it seems as flat as possible attached to the table. So that's it. That's all there is to making a box. Making sure that you keep all your colored pencils really sharp and crisp. That'll allow you to get a uniform application of color. Choose more than just the local color. Try to choose non-local colors in that range. And don't forget at the end to burnish or to add that locked in sort of waxy layer on the top so it all makes sense together. It's that simple, and I know that each one of you can do this. Good luck!